Hello, my name's Adam Cook, and I am here with Ryan King. Hello, mate.
Hello, mate. How you doing?
I'm cracking, but we're here to talk to you for a very specific reason. Because, listen, Ryan, you've got arms, haven't you?
Oh dear,
No, no,
that.
wait, don't jump. No, just answer. Give me a chance.
Okay, yes, Adam. I have arms.
Have you ever punched anyone with your arms?
No, I haven't.
No, you were right. Listen, you've been playing arms on Nintendo Switch. What do you think of it?
I really, really liked it. That's the short answer. I'll give you a slightly longer answer.
Please, yeah.
Yeah, it's really good. I kind of felt as though this is a bit of a weird comparison, and I did try to crowbar it into the review. So bear with me a little bit on this one. I kind of felt as though it did with fighting games, what Mario Kart did with racing games. I kind of felt like it was a really different angle and a different take on fighting games, and I kind of felt it had enough of that Nintendo polish and accessibility running through it that it felt different, while at the same time it had the kind of competitive multiplayer magic that makes fighting games so good. I think the comparison I actually used in the review is Wii boxing with really long arms, and that's a pretty non-glamorous way of describing it, but it's also quite accurate.
Yeah.
And I think that's the best way to look at it. Obviously, it's got a bit more going on than that, but that's essentially what it is.
That's true. I mean, it reminds. I keep thinking. I think this is just because I want a new version of this game so badly, but I keep thinking of Punch Out.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
how you would have to kind of change the way you played for each character that you would face because they had different tactics. And I don't think it's not quite the same.
No, it's not. And actually, it's funny you say that because I've heard quite a few comparisons thrown around for it. Punch Out's one of them. Obviously, I've come up with my awful Wii Sports boxing comparison. A few people I think have mentioned Power Stone, and I think another one they reminded me of is, I don't know if you remember Virtual On by Sega. It was this really old.
Oh shit! Yeah, wow.
Mech fighting game in an arena. I know it came out on Xbox 360 and PS3. I don't know if it's backwards compatible, but yeah, it reminded me a lot of that as well, where it's a lot about jostling for space. It's a lot about
distance
fighting
between
for
you
distance,
as well, isn't it? Yeah.
Distance.
Virtual On was a very beloved game, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was, but unfortunately, only about 5 people played it, so
Yeah,
I'm
those
hoping
5
it's
loved it,
been
though.
successful.
Another one. I mean, we're not just going to spend this whole video comparing, but another one. Before I played the final version of the game, the game that sprung to mind a little bit was like, this is a kind of kid-friendly, almost like a bit like For Honor in that kind of mano a mano, using what you've got to defeat your opponent online kind of thing. I think For Honor's probably, well, I don't know, I was going to say it's a bit deeper, but I suppose that's the question that you can answer here, is like, how, given the characters that you can talk about, given the characters in this game, and their arms, which is, that's the key thing here, the different arms you use to attack with, how deep is arms, do you think?
Hey, do you know what? It's actually a really hard question to answer. I'm not even saying that to duck out of answering. I think we won't really know until the game's been out for weeks and maybe even months. I have a feeling, because when I first played it, I kind of thought this game doesn't have that much to it. It's not really that deep, but it is fun. Having said that, after about 4, 5, 6 hours with it, I was still finding new stuff and new tactics, so that's why I'm not too sure which way it'll fall yet. I think there's enough variance in the characters and the arms that there'll be enough depth to start with that will kind of keep players going for the first couple of weeks. And then after that, I think it just really depends on the online community and how far people push it. Like, there aren't special moves to learn. Again, you don't learn combos. You kind of learn what the arms do straight away, but I think developing the tactics is what's going to keep the game going. It's just whether that's it'll keep you playing for days or if it keeps you playing for months thing. That's where I'm not sure where it's going to fall. I think it'll have the legs or the
I was
arms.
going to use that. I can't believe you stole my joke there.
I'm so sorry. We should have discussed this beforehand.
We should have, but I was just debating whether or not to go with Ryan, does arms have legs, or will the sequel be called Legs? So I think you got there because I was trying to formulate which would be the... Yeah, I don't think either are great.
Possible, and then I stole it, so I do apologize.
I mean, listen, it's fair game. It's out there. Speaking of the online, generally speaking of the multiplayer, the thing that I noticed, and I know you mentioned this in your review, it's definitely a game that a lot of games like this, even thinking of Wii boxing or whatever, you play it with the motion controls and you go, well, actually, I just want to, like most motion control games, you kind of go, well, I just actually want to sit on my ass on the sofa and just use a controller. But this is, there's no argument to say it's better with a controller, because there are literally things you can't do with a controller, right?
Yeah, and I think this comes back again to my point about there not being like special moves or combos. Yeah, first of all, you are right. There are things you just can't do with a controller, and the main thing that you can't do is you can't curve both punches at the same time, or maybe you can. It's just incredibly difficult. So what you do is you throw a punch, twist the Joy-Con, and then the punch kind of spins either left or right. You need to do it because one of the defining things about the multiplayer is the movement. You need to move out the way of attacks, you need to kind of dash out the way, and you need to second guess where they're going to go. That is much easier when you're playing with motion control than when you're playing with pad. So that's definitely one thing. And I think the other aspect of it is, and this is almost going to sound as though I'm saying something negative about the game. It's not at all, but you don't really need the precision that you get with a controller either, with pressing the buttons. It's a game that you can play just as well, obviously, physically punching. And if anything, I think it feels more engaging when you do it. And because it's a game where you are just throwing punches and you're not like going for these 3-frame combos or whatever, then you might as well just play on motion controls. It was definitely more fun, and yeah, you're totally right. Like, it's actually the better way of playing. It's quite surprising, really. One of the things I noticed when I was playing it in multiplayer is it gets really frantic towards the end of each round, especially if both players have a tiny bit of health. Like, what tends to happen is both players hide behind blocks, someone's waiting for the other one to make the first move, someone eventually does, and then it all kicks off, everyone starts flailing everywhere. That makes a lot more sense in motion control. Yes, you're flailing, but you can still kind of flick your punches left and right than it does playing on buttons. I don't really know how you can kind of replicate that on buttons. I mean, obviously I don't design games, but just having a quick think about it now, I don't really think it would work. Which is why I guess controls are the motion controls are the default when you play it.
So one last thing before we let these lovely people go that I have to ask you, and it's a bit of a negative way to end the review. There's going to be comparisons made to Splatoon with this because it's a new IP for Nintendo, and Splatoon, when it launched on Wii U, was a little bit low on the content thing. I have to say, this makes Splatoon kind of look like Elder Scrolls in terms of content, doesn't it?
See, that's the comparison I do like. Yeah, I was going to say you're being a little unfair, but maybe you're not. I mean, they've got plenty of mini games on the menu, and it kind of, when you first look at the menu, you go, oh wow, look at all these different modes. They put so much in here, but actually, the only one that I thought was kind of worth playing was the V-Ball. Maybe, kind of, it varies for different people, but I just think...
Well, it does, because when I read that in your review, I thought, V-Ball's alright, but I was enjoying the basketball. But then maybe that's because I just love dunking people through it. I think that's very funny. The concept,
Yeah, I think it's going to, vary depending on people and their different tastes, obviously, which is a pretty obvious thing to point out. But I don't think you'll find anyone who kind of uniformly goes, all these mini games are amazing. Like, they're just not. They're mild distractions at best. And the thing is, like, the actual main mode itself is a pretty dry run through of the characters in the game. So I think you're right. I think it's like Splatoon, though, in that the content isn't really there. I think what it depends on is obviously how competitive multiplayer gets, how much people play. And actually, another thing as well, which Splatoon did have, is it had really good post-launch support from Nintendo.
Yes,
hopefully, I mean, Nintendo aren't stupid. They'll see that's what kind of gave Splatoon its legs. Hopefully it'll be the same thing with ARMS. They've got the game there. The game itself is absolutely brilliant. I loved it. So as long as they keep adding, I think, characters to it, arenas, and new ARMS as well, it can run and run. I think that's where the content will come from rather than what they launch with day one.
It's interesting as well because, like you mentioned, the game is brilliant. But one thing I think you don't notice when you're actually playing it, in fact, it was only when I sort of stopped to look back at the footage recorded and like screenshots for the review that I sort of thought it's a really good-looking game as well. Like, you don't, because it's like any fighting game, you don't sort of, because you're in it, you don't notice it until you're sort of watching someone else, and then you go, God, that really is well designed. And I think ARMS, we didn't really mention it, but it is a very good-looking game, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's kind of easy to take it for granted as well. You almost, It's not as though we're spoiled, but I think there's a little element of that. I think because especially if you look at fighting games that just come out recently, like Injustice, like Tekken, I know they're very different style, but everything's been really, really top draw in terms of visuals. Yeah, I mean, ARMS is right up there as well. It looks amazing. And the other thing as well is worth mentioning is that even when it does get really, really frantic, you never really lose sight of what's going on or what's happening. Like, everything. You still get feedback communicated perfectly through the numbers, through the hit animations, through everything else. It's a really, really nice looking game. I mean, it's a Nintendo game, and you can tell it's come from their A team. It looks really, really nice.
Definitely. Well, listen, if anyone wants to know even more, they can go to godisgeek.com and you'll be able to find Ryan's ARMS review there. It will be interesting to see what happens with this, and if it's like a Splatoon thing where they keep supporting it, where they make another one eventually, because it's definitely an interesting game, I think, and I totally agree with what you've said. But yeah, go to godisgeek.com and you can read Ryan's full review. Ryan, thank you very much for your time.
Cheers, mate.
And we'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye for now.